You're listening to the Mike on the Right podcast.
Hiya, friends. Welcome to another bold and, dare I say, brilliant episode of the Mike on the Right podcast. I am your host, Mike Neal, and yes, the rumors are true. Common sense is still alive. You can find it right here on this podcast. We are broadcasting from the heart of the heartland in central Indiana, the great Hoosier state. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. Thank you for being here. It means a lot to me. Please like, share, subscribe, follow wherever you're listening to this, or if you're seeing clips on social media, would greatly appreciate it. And something new I'm asking, please, on whatever platform you're listening to or where you may be seeing our content, a 5-star rating would be greatly appreciated. You're the ones that make this work. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We've got a great show for you today, probably one that's going to deepen my shadow ban on TikTok, if you've seen some of our socials lately. And before I begin, something is always happening, and I wish I was getting an opportunity to do this on a daily basis, because so many things happen every single day that I can't cover everything I want to talk about. But you've seen what's been going on with this California senator who disrupted a press conference and they removed him. There's all that, tumultuousness. But more importantly, yesterday, if you're listening to this, this is the 7th episode. This is the 13th of June, June 13th, a Friday. Friday the 13th, so everything's always weird, right? But what we're seeing is the Israeli military has struck strategic targets in Iran related to their nuclear program, killing several generals and hopefully setting the Iranians back on their quest to get nuclear weapons. They are a terrorist state. They are an evil state. Their people are oppressed. Their people are yearning for freedom. And this country is doing bad stuff. And in fact, the United Nations, which I'm not a fan of, even just recently said, hey, with the non-proliferation stuff that you're supposed to be doing, you're not following the rules. And Israel has struck them. And so we're not for war. I don't want endless war, but when evil needs to be confronted and you've done everything else you can do, you've got to do what you got to do. I stand personally behind Israel and the work that they're doing, and I hope the United States continues to support their ally as they always have. Now, we got to move on. We're not going to get to all the things I want to talk about today. First, what is going on with the riots on the streets of Los Angeles? The immigration raids, and why looting a Foot Locker isn't part of the answer. We're going to cut through the noise. We're going to get to the truth. The other item I want to talk about is that the U.S. has started to cut ties with China when it comes to manufacturing and parts of our economy, and why we need to accelerate that and do more. Let's talk about that. And the last one, Greta Thunberg. Yes, that climate activist young girl from Sweden got deported from the Middle East last week. Why was she even there? We're going to talk about that in the coming moments of this fantastic program. Thank you again for being here. Let's get into it. We need to talk about what's happening in Los Angeles right now. Over the last week, protests and riots have erupted in response to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, raids across the city, from downtown to the valley, even outside places like Home Depots, where day laborers are attempting to get work. They've been detained. And when I say they, we're talking about those who are breaking our immigration laws. The optics are certainly intense. The arrests are widespread. And as of yesterday, if you might have read, a federal judge has stepped in to block part of the Trump administration's response and essentially trying to give Governor Newsom back control of the currently federalized California National Guard. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about what the law says. Even if you like the tactics or don't like the tactics, we're going to talk about the foundations of what's occurring. And you can certainly draw your own conclusions. I have my own, and I will share them with you. But this is, firstly, let's go through the timeline. So on June 6th, ICE carried out large-scale operations across the city of Los Angeles targeting undocumented immigrants, not just those with a criminal record, but of course all of them who are violating federal immigration law. The move was reportedly pushed by White House advisor Stephen Miller, who is certainly a controversial figure in the administration. expanding ICE's authority into traditionally hands-off zones in California, sanctuary cities, and other items that the state and the cities have put before them on statutes and through ordinances. And what's the response been to all of this federal work? Protesters have poured into the streets. Some of those protests have turned violent with clashes, property damage, and of course disruptions across the city. And I am for peaceable protests. But when you start tearing up crap, just what happened during the pandemic here in Indianapolis and across the United States, I am 100% for peaceful protests. But you start tearing things up, hands off. It's time to reset. And that's what's been going on through the Los Angeles Police Department. And now, as of June 7th, President Trump invoked the Insurrection Act, which is a rarely used provision that lets the president deploy military forces in cases of rebellion or unrest that obstruct federal law. Let's remind ourselves, immigration is a federal issue. Over 4,000 California National Guard men and women, the troops were federalized, and other 700 U.S. Marines were deployed to protect federal buildings and to assist ICE as a backup. And, of course, the enforcement of pushing people back, getting people along that are being disruptive to stop, helping the LAPD. And that's where things got heated. And California has pushed back hard. Governor Gavin Newsom filed a federal lawsuit claiming Trump overstepped his authority, hijacking California's own National Guard without consent and violating the 10th Amendment. And just yesterday, June 12th, a federal judge agreed, at least temporarily, that a restraining order needs to be placed saying that, hey, the president's federalization of the Guard may be unconstitutional. The judge compared the move to something you wouldn't expect from the United States, but more from King George back in merry old England. And there is not precedent here for this action under the Constitution. The ruling blocks Trump from using troops in this way until a full hearing on June 20th. Now I'm going to get to what I believe is right, what I believe is wrong. The immigration raids is a federal law being enforced. Everything that is happening right now, you may not like how it's being done, but what is happening right now is 100% enforcement of current law in the United States, whether it's criminal, which is those coming into the country who shouldn't be, or civil, those who have overstayed their welcome and are still here today. Regardless, all of those end in deportation. The ones related to visas can mean that, hey, you do this and you stay here longer than you're supposed to and you don't follow the policies and the rules or reapply or whatever you have to do, you may not be allowed here under that again, or you may be temporarily banned. You don't want that. But whether you like the way it looks or not, ICE is acting under current law. Being in the country illegally is a deportable offense. And that's been true under every presidency, Democrat and Republican. And President Biden before, and President Obama before him, then Trump, and then President Obama, they've deported more folks than Trump has so far. President Trump is the commander-in-chief, and under Title X and under the Insurrection Act, he can federalize the National Guard of any state and deploy troops to protect federal interests when rebellion or obstruction occurs. The Department of Justice has even argued that these decisions are not subject to judicial review, though the judge in this case disagrees, and they will have their day in court. This certainly is an escalation, let's be honest. We have not used soldiers in this way before, and it is certainly unprecedented. But I don't believe it's illegal. Never before have we seen this scale of federal force in a sanctuary state used to support immigration enforcement. And largely because every administration prior, Republican and Democrat, has failed to get this under control and has failed to right-size the current immigration laws to work better for those who are trying to come legally, to shorten the time frame it takes for them to become approved to be citizens or work in this country or what have you. And then once we get that straight, then say, okay, then those who are here illegally, this is the rule and law. It's not a compromise. That's the deal to be made. I talked about this in a previous episode. And of course, these are just National Guard troops that normally are helping with wildfires or disasters or other types of things. This is boots on the ground from these same folks, our citizens, our neighbors, trying to quell civil unrest and enforce immigration law. And yes, the tactics may be seen as heavy-handed to some, but heavy-handed does not mean illegal. And I don't believe that the president has broken the law here. But let me address something from a faith perspective. I have seen several friends, essentially same folks that say that President Trump is misusing Scripture, doing the same with faith-based objections. I've seen people quoting Leviticus 19. It says, "Treat the stranger among you as your native born." And yes, Scripture does call for compassion. I believe that. 100% compassion is something that God calls us to as Christians, to those in need. These same folks ignore, though, a lot of other things in Leviticus, and we're not going to get into that now. But let's be clear. Leviticus 19 speaks of a phrase called sojourners, or those who enter lawfully and live peaceably. And in the Bible, sojourner is translated to both stranger or alien, and is a person who resides temporarily in a place, often not as an immigrant, but as a temporary resident. This term in the Hebrew is ger, which is used to describe individuals who are not permanent residents of a place, but are living there for a period of time. It is not a license for lawlessness. Nowhere in Scripture is illegal activity excused because it is done in the name of compassion. Nowhere. And in fact, let's go to Romans 13 that says, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God." And the only time we are called to rebel against governing authorities is when they tell us to do something that God has told us not to do. And I'm telling you, in Leviticus, there is nothing here that says what's happening is against the Lord. Now, there may be other actions that may not be as compassionate as they need to be, and I certainly call for those to be smoothed over and to be correctly done. But government has a God-given role to uphold order. And if we throw out immigration law, we're not just ignoring statutes, we're undermining the biblical principle of justice and structure. And so we can help these folks who need help, who can come to this country. I am telling you that the immigration law system is broken 100%. I am the first to admit it. I admit it right here on the show. I say it over and over and over again. But that doesn't mean we throw out the baby with all of the bathwater. So where does this leave us? So we have a president who's enforcing the law firmly, but legally. We have a state in the union that is pushing back, California, challenging the reach of federal power. And that's what the courts are for. The court has stepped in and says that the law itself is unjust, but the question is, they're saying that they don't believe the law itself is unjust, but how it's being enforced may be. And that's the real story here. And then there's certainly a question of whether or not this has judicial review components at all. That will be heard through the process, probably going to the U.S. Supreme Court. But let's say this right here. Immigration law has been tangentially enforced. It has not been fully enforced like it has been intended to, and it is time to do that. And this debate is not about compassion versus cruelty. It's about constitutional limits, state sovereignty, and presidential authority in times of unrest. We're going to keep watching this as it unfolds, but let's not be fooled. These aren't any new laws. This is existing law being enforced, and a country wrestling with what that looks like in the real world. We're going to move on from that. We're going to talk about the next topic that I have for us on the show, and that is divesting from China in the economy. This is something that affects every American, from our economy to our national security to the freedom of our kids and our families and our friends. I am talking about China, and more specifically, the urgent need for the United States to divest from it economically. Perhaps not fully, but certainly we need more diversity in economic matters, and nothing taught us that more in recent history than COVID-19 and the government shutdowns and shutdowns across the world. That was a wake-up call for us. We saw firsthand what happens when we tie our future to a communist regime that does not share our values, and when we put certain types of eggs all in one basket, we get screwed. And we did. Semiconductors and chips and medicines and all types of things. We have to do better to diversify where we're getting manufacturing items from, we're getting medicine from, where we're getting chips from, electronics. It's time to ask, who owns your medicine? Who owns your tech? Who owns your supply chain? So 80 to 90% of antibiotics, let's just go through this medical dependence. 80 to 90% of antibiotics and many active pharmaceutical ingredients are produced in China. During COVID, we realized China could cut us off at any moment, and even if they didn't want to cut us off, because production was shut down everywhere across China and really across the world, there was no place to get these. Hospitals were scrambling for masks and gloves and ventilators, most of which came from China. The supply chain collapsed. Everything from electronics to meat packing was vulnerable because China is embedded in almost every global manufacturing process. And on its face, it's not wrong to have manufacturing in China just like any other country. The problem is not all of it can be there. We have to diversify, not just across the world, but right here in the United States. And then let's not forget that the Chinese Communist Party silenced doctors, hid early cases, manipulated the World Health Organization, and people died because that truth was suppressed. And then furthermore, because there was an inadequate response, we started losing access to goods and services coming out of China. For a few months, the most powerful nation on the earth, the United States, was brought to its knees because we allowed a hostile power to hold our supply chains hostage. No more. China is not just a competitor. It is, and has been for a long time, an adversary in which we've had an uneasy, it's not even an alliance, an uneasy relationship with. They are a geopolitical foe. They are friends with people like Iran and Venezuela and Cuba and Russia and North Korea. We're not talking about our hunky-dory neighbor. We're talking about people that don't like us, but just like people say money talks, they need us to buy their goods, and we need them. They hack our systems, they steal our technology, they aim to overtake us economically and militarily. When we buy Chinese, we are funding, and there's nothing we can do about it. When you go to Walmart, when you go to Sam's Club, when you go to Costco, when you go to Aldi, there's so many things that are made in China. But we're funding that mechanism. We're funding the very people that don't like us. Now, certainly it's a little different between China and other countries like Iran and those who are, trying to build nuclear weapons so that they can nuke people they don't like. But China is not our quirky little ally. And they're trying to expand their global influence over the United States. COVID showed us that we need domestic production and diversification of overseas production. Not just for the crisis response in case that ever happens again, not because we need the supply chain, but because basic self-respect as a nation. We were stuck. And thankfully, they didn't pull a trigger that they could have pulled. We believe in freedom. We believe in God-given rights as a nation. They believe in control and censorship and forced obedience. And we're still propping them up. This is the problem we have with not diversifying our supply chain. The Trump administration has already done some things to kind of get us away from this. They've imposed tariffs, of course, to rebalance the unfair trade practices. Like them or not, that's what he's done. We've reshored some manufacturing. We've brought them home, particularly in critical sectors like semiconductors. And that's happening right here in Indiana. What's going on with Purdue University and the LEAP district, again, like it or don't like it, some of that is coming here to Indiana from other countries that we need to rebalance that. We need to bring some of that back. And we have blacklisted Chinese military-linked companies from U.S. investments. We've done it right here in Indiana. We're doing it across the United States. A lot of people on my side of the aisle, especially conservatives, don't like the CHIPS Act, but the CHIPS Act invested billions in bringing semiconductor manufacturing back home. It's needed. It's necessary. You may not like the legislation. You may not like the guy who brought it. But at the end of the day, we needed to move something that brought this stuff back to the United States. COVID era emergency powers were used to increase U.S. production of medical supplies. And the federal push for reshoring and buying American, they've ingrained that in those procurement policies. Also, the private sector has shifted. Apple, Dell, and others began moving supply chains to India, Vietnam, and back to the United States. Again, that diversification. And American venture capital began divesting from China and the Chinese tech firms under public pressure. We've passed laws in the last 2 General Assemblies right here in the United States over that. What still needs to happen, though? That's what's been done. That's kind of where things are going. What still do we need to do? We need a strategic decoupling, not total isolation, but a clean break in critical sectors: defense, medicine, food, energy, technology. We need to incentivize U.S. manufacturing using, I know some folks that are listening don't like it, tax breaks, low interest loans, regulatory relief to rebuild our industrial base. We're not back yet in every area. We are not back yet from the damage that COVID did to our economy. We're still working on it. And where we can't bring manufacturing back to the United States, we need to go to other places that are developing nations or friends or allies who are looking for critical investments in their infrastructure by getting us and companies from the United States and across the world to manufacture or to headquarter or to do whatever in their countries. We're talking like India, Vietnam, Mexico, Malaysia, Thailand, the Philippines, Indonesia, and Poland. Folks don't think about Poland being a potential economic powerhouse in Europe. We can move away and diversify by using countries that are not normally on the list that we would think about that. Poland's a great place to do that. We need to ban federal contracts with China-linked firms. No more taxpayer dollars. You haven't heard much about TikTok, and they're shadow banning me, so I'm totally okay with kind of punching them in the gut. But we need to stop giving taxpayer dollars to companies that work as the Communist Party's proxies in China. Let's push allies to join us. We need to lead a coalition of freedom-loving nations to divest from China, not just economically, but ideologically. Not fully, but we have to get a more level playing field. And we need to invest in real national preparedness. Stockpiles, domestic production, emergency powers must be ready before the next crisis hits. This is our national security. This is our economy. This is our freedom. Each of those depend on moving away from China and investing in the United States and other countries across the world. Let's get it done. Last item I want to talk to you about today, Greta Thunberg. That name familiar? Tried to sail to Gaza, gets deported. Let's talk about why. She's a Swedish climate activist, and she got deported after being detained by Israeli forces while trying to sail directly into Gaza aboard a vessel that was in the name of humanitarian aid. This wasn't some symbolic protest in Europe. This was a deliberate attempt to breach a naval blockade that even is backed by the useless United Nations in a war zone. And she did it alongside pro-Palestinian activists, at least one of them being a European politician. Now, again, I am not anti-Palestinian people. I am anti-Hamas, and they are or were the controlling factor in Gaza. And it's going to be a long time coming before that gets decoupled. But who is Greta Thunberg? And how did she rise to fame? Let's give you a quick history lesson. Greta is a Swedish climate activist who rose to global prominence as a teenager by skipping school, dumb, every Friday to protest climate inaction outside the Swedish parliament. Don't skip school. Like her or don't like her, don't skip school. Her original stunt was dubbed Fridays for Future, a solo protest that quickly went viral, gaining the attention of international media and climate organizations. Young people do that. Passion from young people do that, for sure. She's just like the Swedish Megan Stoner, if you know who that is. What made it catch fire? A stern-looking 15-year-old wagging her finger at the world leaders, telling adults to panic, which is not policy, that's emotion. She became famous for not solutions, but for scolding speeches, her tearful expressions and dramatic lines like, "How dare you," to the 2019 UN Climate Summit. Since then, she's turned into a symbol of youthful age and now jet-setting activist who protests the very systems that funder platform. I'm not a fan. I will often give you both sides of a story. With this gal, no. I don't believe in this whatsoever, and what she's done is egregious. So what actually happened? I'm going to give you the details on that. You make your judgment from here. On June 1st, Greta boarded a ship, which was a UK-flagged vessel that was sailing from Sicily as part of the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, a group with a long history of trying to challenge Israel's blockade of Gaza. Now, this blockade has been here a long time. It's not just with this Hamas war that happened since October of 2023. There has always been some elements of a blockade to try to keep arms from entering Gaza to support Hamas from other countries such as Iran, who supports global terror and supports the destruction of Israel in every sense of the world. Her stated goal was delivering humanitarian aid, like baby formula, rice, medical supplies. But make no mistake, I believe this was a political stunt. This was not a logistical supply mission. And I'll tell you why. This is the foreign minister, Gideon Saar, who said that Greta and her friends brought in a tiny amount of aid on their celebrity yacht. I wouldn't call it a celebrity yacht. It was just a small little ship. It did not help the people of Gaza. This is nothing but a ridiculous gimmick. By June 9th, Israeli naval forces intercepted the vessel in international waters, which is consistent with how they've been handling similar flotillas over the years. The ship was redirected to the Israeli port of Ashdod, and all 12 passengers, including Greta, were detained and subsequently deported. I've given you the facts, and I've really tried to give you the facts without muddling it up with my opinion, but now I'm full bearer. Why was this reckless and not brave? Gaza is an active war zone, and it is a hotbed of terrorism that is being stripped apart. Israel has a legal, court-recognized naval blockade. This is the one thing that people seem to agree on, because it's been here for so long. It's to prevent weapons and military supplies from reaching Hamas. She's trying to break that blockade, and even under the guise of aid is not activism, it's provocation. It's a stunt. Aid can be delivered through coordinated humanitarian channels. If this was truly about aid to Gaza and to the people who are hurting, and who do need help, there is a system that Israel has built to do that. But when you get on a boat and you head straight for the war through a blockade that you know exists, instead of just saying, hey, why don't I donate this to those who have been authorized to provide this? And it's not just about authorization. It's supported by the Israeli government because Hamas so often steals and takes away this aid. So ensuring that it gets to the right people means ensuring an orderly process. This wasn't about helping people. It was about making headlines. You don't help citizens of countries and places in need by grandstanding in contested waters. You help them by working through policy, not publicity stunts. You go through order. There is a process to do this. You could donate as much as you want, and it will get to folks. That's not what this was. But Greta is about the brand and not about the solution. This is why she is not taken seriously by anyone that has any power to do anything, just over the span of her little career. She leads with emotion and optics. Now, look, I am for young people standing up and being passionate, including those that disagree with me. But that's not what this is. This is reckless stuff we're talking about. This is not the stuff that I support, even if you disagree with me. I don't support these kind of things. Her brand thrives on confrontation, school walkouts, angry speeches, symbolic protests, and now dangerous international provocation in a war zone. She could have got these folks killed. Who knows what would have happened? Who knows who else was out there? This flotilla wasn't about climate. It wasn't about peace. It was about Greta inserting herself into yet another global flashpoint where her presence adds heat and not light. It hurts things. It doesn't help things. This was her quote. "We were 12 peaceful volunteers sailing on a civilian ship carrying humanitarian aid on international waters. We did not break laws. We did nothing wrong. This is what she told reporters as she flew into Paris, accusing Israel of kidnapping her. No, you were arrested and deported for entering a war zone and attempting to enter a country illegally. We just got done talking about immigration. You got bounced. You should have been bounced. What's her real agenda here? Greta increasingly blends climate activism with anti-Western, anti-Israel, anti-capitalist narratives. It's about a brand, not a solution. She's joined the trend of using justice language to lump everything together. Climate justice, racial justice, Palestinian justice, all without clarity or accountability or a plan, all about media and stunts. You know what she should do? She needs to get up on her platform and say, I'm going to create a GoFundMe page, and I need people to donate millions and millions and millions of dollars, and I'm going to take this to Sam's Club and Costco and whoever else across the world and BJ's. We're going to buy as much food and diapers and clothes as we need, and then we're going to work with these folks who are already on the ground, who are authorized, and who are protected to ensure that these items get to the people who really need it, and that is how you use your platform to help, not this crap. The Gaza flotilla fits perfectly into her mold. The photo op under the banner of justice, being kidnapped, and what it does is it ignores the real complexities of war, terrorism, sovereignty, helping people, and true compassion. This was a stunt, plain and simple. I ain't having it. Israel had every right to act. Their blockade is legal. The country is at war, working out terrorists from their country, trying to defeat Hamas, and deporting these folks was the right thing to do. It's lawful enforcement. It's not oppression. So my final thoughts with Greta, she's not a hero, she's a headline. This wasn't about humanitarian aid, it was about publicity. This wasn't about helping Palestinians in need, it was about vilifying Israel. It's not about solutions, it's about slogans and selfies. Greta Thunberg's flotilla stunts remind us that modern activism often values attention over impact, and we need to call it out where it stands. Friends, that's all I've got for you today. I've been a little heated in the last segment, but I appreciate you sticking with me. It's not always the case, but some things just really grind my gears. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. Please like, share, follow, subscribe wherever you're listening to this ad or whether you're seeing our clips on social media. Help us get the word out. And please, a 5-star rating on wherever you're listening to this on or whether you're on social media. We appreciate your support. God bless. Have a great week.